welcome to the Suzanne Atwell Show. I'm Suzanne Atwell. We begin with education, specifically charter schools, the pros, the cons, the costs, the benefits. We begin with one of our area's most successful charter schools, the Sarasota Military Academy.
Well, we're a public charter school, and the best thing is that all of our students choose to come here. And every one of our students takes JROTC, which is a class that they learn leadership skills, all kinds of practical skills for after high school, and structure. And that structure permeates throughout our whole entire campus and really just sets the tone for the expectations and what our cadets do each day.
Well, it's interesting. I've lived here for 25 years and I see students everywhere. I've marched in many parades. And what also strikes me about the students, they're community oriented. They give back to the community. They go beyond the school. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So that is something that we're really proud of, and our students love getting out into the community, helping out where they can, and it's a way for them to find what they're interested in and feel that positive feeling for helping out, people in need or anything in the community. One of the really neat things is I frequently get phone calls from businesses and community members asking for specifically our cadets to help them with a fundraising activity or a 5K. Our cadets are reliable, they're respectful. When businesses have part-time jobs and positions available, they'll call and they'll want to reach out to our cadets first before they open it up and place ads, because our cadets just have what it takes to be productive and positive in the community.
That's wonderful. I understand you just got new stats on enrollment figures.
And so we're just under right around 900 cadets right now. Some of our cadets aren't here full time, and so that's why the number is always a little flexible, because we'll have cadets that attend here full time, but then also cadets that go to State College of Florida or STC and participate in some other academic programs in addition to being an SMA cadet.
Some say in our community that charter schools are filling a need that public schools can't. Could you go into that a little more about choices that we have in our community in Sarasota County?
Sure. All of our students in Sarasota County can choose any school, regardless of what district they're in.
Right.
And so charter schools just provide a niche that sometimes students need, and all schools provide a certain kind of a niche, and so it's just a matter of the students and the parents finding where their student feels most comfortable and what programs they'd like to participate in to make their high school experience positive.
And I understand you have enrollment meetings that include the parents, so that you can educate the parents as to what the choice would be if they came here.
Exactly.
Talk to me about that a little bit.
So about twice a month in the mornings, we'll have parents and prospective students come. They attend our morning formation. We do every single morning. That's where we raise the flag. And one of the really unique things about SMA is our culture and our feeling of community. And so that's where we meet all on the pavers. We raise the flag. We pay respects. We do morning announcements, and then we also recognize cadets for any accomplishments that they've recently, been a part of, or an award that they've received. So it starts to build that sense of family and community, and then we send them off to first period, and so that really sets the tone for how our day will go. And that's kind of a unique feature in a high school, because there's not a lot of opportunities for an entire school to get together once you hit that high school level.
Sure, and you are a public charter school,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
you report to the county
Yes, ma'am.
board. Absolutely. A lot of people think that Sarasota Military Academy, they're all going into the military when they graduate. Help me understand, what is the reality there?
So the percentage of students that go into the military right from high school is about the same as any other high school. We do have a lot of students who decide that they do want to go into the military, and they get ROTC scholarships in college. So we do have a good number of students that do that. And then we have a high number of students, relatively speaking, that get accepted into service academies. And so last year our senior class had 3 students go on to a service academy, which we're really proud of. And so 3 doesn't sound like a lot, but for one graduating class, it's just incredible. And we've already had one of our seniors this year receive a nomination for West Point, and another student get her appointment to West Point. So we're really proud of that, and it's an exciting time of the year to start hearing those things.
Well, we're getting into spring when you
Exactly.
get college acceptance. Do they still have where your local congressman needs to appoint them?
They're-
Someone was asking me the other day if that still holds true.
Yeah, they have the congressman. There's a couple different options and routes that you can take to get into the service academies, and the nomination from the congressman is one of them.
Right. Interesting. Another question, people always feel that charter schools, and you did talk about the need that with House Bill 7069, allocation of dollars, and I know that's a large, very broad subject as to what happens to the more traditional public schools versus charter. You delved into that a little bit, but do you think that our traditional public schools are under attack?
I don't think so. I think charter schools, the beauty of Sarasota County is Sarasota County and charter schools have a really positive relationship.
That's different. We're talking about the county.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
And so is it possible for other counties? I don't work in those counties. I can't speak on it. But Sarasota County and charter schools have a phenomenal relationship, and we work really closely together. And Sarasota County's always been so generous. And I was just at the Landings yesterday for a principals meeting. We do professional development there, and we can tap into their resources, and we work together. And so it's really positive here.
You're a presence. It sounds like your entire school's a presence within the governing structure, and everything needs to be in this community. But it's interesting, you're kind of growing exponentially. But you want to stop at 1,000?
1,000's our prime number. A few years ago, we did get around 1,200 or 1,300, and we want to make sure that we can still provide that feeling of family and community and give the individual attention to the cadets that they deserve. So 1,000 is probably our prime number.
That's good. Work within the limits of that. Another question that's often raised is, we use the word accountability a lot, and the accountability of the qualifications of teachers in charter schools versus the, public charter schools versus private charter schools. How do you address that question, that the accountability and the resumes of teachers that you hire here?
Well, we're also accountable to the Sarasota County School Board.
Right.
And so every year we have an opening of checklists where we produce documentation to the county and show that we're maintaining the standard. Sarasota, like I said, is just a great county, and we have such terrific schools. So we're part of that, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining our accountability and we're maintaining the expectation that the residents of Sarasota County have.
That is quite a story. Thanks to the folks at SMA for welcoming us into their school. We turn now to public schools and hear from one of the most trusted and respected persons in our community, former Superintendent Lori White. Last year, after 39 years as a Sarasota County school system employee, the final 9 years as superintendent, Lori retired. We recently had the honor of sitting down with her.
Well, certainly education has such a critical role in our society that it's appropriate that we always examine it and find ways that we can improve a system that's so important to us. And certainly there has been a feeling at times that public education across the country is under attack. I know that there are wonderful schools. There are certainly incredible schools in this school district. But we live in a state where the funding isn't at the level that it's at many other schools and at many other states. And so that can be difficult in terms of elevating all schools to that high level. I think we do a wonderful job in this school district, particularly because we get additional funding through our voted millage that's made all the difference through some very tough years in the state funding, but that continues to be a challenge.
How does House Bill 7069 disrupt this equilibrium?
Well, in terms of the
Allocation of funding.
and our charter schools and certainly the concept of how to distribute operational dollars has been in place for a while. And charter schools are considered public schools, and they get the proportional share of those dollars. That's why it's so important as the LEA, as school districts approve a charter school, that they know that this is a charter school that can be successful and is worthy of being one of their schools in their school district. Our district has always been, I think, very fair to our charter schools. It's a high bar to get in, but once you're in, you're supported, not only with the proportionate share by law of the operational dollars, but we were one of the only districts that gave some capital dollars to them, and we also gave their proportionate share of the voted referendum dollars, which then helps all schools. So funding is a very necessary component of a successful school, and in this school district, charter schools are a part of that funding system.
And how is that reflected in teacher salaries? The comparison, I've been often asked how that is allocated with the teachers in a charter school as opposed to a more traditional public school.
Well, certainly within the regular public schools, that's a contract that's negotiated. In your charter schools, they are not typically unionized, and so they have flexibility in terms of their salaries. And you see some differences at some schools depending on their priorities and how they set up their funding of teachers, but they have to be competitive. So they have to offer a salary that won't provide only for teachers that are there for 1 year and then they want to get into the regular school district. So it's a choice that their board, each charter school has a board that has to, with the school leadership, has to make decisions on how to distribute the dollars they're allocated.
And that may be the question that a lot of the charter schools, some of them have parental involvement in when their students are enrolling and how it works. So that there's a lot of, and that goes to the question, how much are parents educated to what their child is getting into with a different school if they're choosing another school, and that gets into the whole choice thing.
Sure, and that's really beyond charter schools.
Right, yes.
I find parents are very engaged in that process. They're perhaps less engaged if they're not looking for a choice school in terms of they're just going to their districted school. But I find that parents do their homework. I've always told parents, don't make a decision on a school based on the talk. Make a decision by visiting the school. See, I see some parents, they discount an option that they have and they've never set foot on the campus. They've never talked to that principal to find out what programs are offered there. So I really encourage parents to become very educated in the choices they have. That's their responsibility and they live with that choice and their child lives with it. So do your homework, but not just on what you hear, but on-site visitations.
I think that's a great idea. I think also a lot of problems can arise when we have a certain definition of what family is, especially in the state of Florida and in the legislature, that a family consists of mom and dad and the dog, and that's not true. A lot of these decisions are made by a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, that some of these opportunities and options are not as readily available to people, and that's often disconcerting to people. How do we get everybody on board with that to be a good parent to come to a meeting?
And in all fairness, some families are at a disadvantage because of their income level, where some of the choices that are available to them they can't access because of transportation issues. And so that's, sometimes we think it's all, everyone has that choice. That's not always true.
Transportation is important. I know, I read a story, and there again, it's sometimes what you read, these stories that there wasn't enough bus transportation at some school in Florida, so they had to triple up the students on the bus to be able to, for them to get to the school that they wanted to go to. I mean, that's, to me, it seems like that should be against the law when you, and no seatbelts. You know, we're getting to that point where transporting our students is so critical, and that's all part of that.
Well, in some cases, your choice school, that's not even an option of getting the bus transportation, that if you choose this school outside of your districted school, then you must provide your own transportation. Now, most of our charters do provide transportation within, but to the best that they can. There's limitations for them as well as how much they can afford, how far they can afford. So it's my point is that it's not always equitable in terms of what choices are really available to all parents and families.
And what about teacher salaries? A lot of people ask about the teacher salaries of a charter school as opposed to a more traditional public school, and what's the accountability there?
Well, you know, I think there's a lot of accountability with charter schools because teachers can make a decision whether or not they're going to teach there. Families make a decision whether or not they're going to go there and can change their minds at any time. But I find that there's a lot of similarities because there's just, particularly at a time where teacher recruitment is going to become more and more of an issue.
Absolutely.
We have our baby boomers that are retiring, and so you have vacancies. You don't have as many young people going into the teaching field. So I think everyone is very mindful of being very competitive, particularly for some certification areas. You don't want to have a long-term substitute or someone that's not certified in a position. because you simply are not offering sufficient pay. Because even when you're offering competitive pay, it's going to be very hard filling some positions across the state.
And also going to teaching to the test, where are we on that and how that paralyzes some efforts for good education when we're teaching to the test as far as employing teachers? If the tests work out well, they will get a raise. I mean, that opens up a whole nother Pandora's box.
Well, and there's two parts to that. You have a very rigorous accountability system in the state of Florida that frankly I would welcome, because I think we owe it to our public to have visible means of how are we doing.
Standards.
And the standards, and when you say you're teaching to the test, in some ways you're teaching to those standards, which is appropriate. The problem in Florida is where they tried to use those scores for so many other purposes and getting it to the level of determining the effectiveness of a teacher, and it's only for those grade levels where you can have that comparison, so it's not all teachers where you really have that ability to use those assessment, and how you balance that with what the dynamics that are occurring from year to year in a classroom. So it's not to the point where we're saying we want to do away with all accountability, we want to do away with testing, but we have to be more cautious about how we use those assessments that were never designed for all those purposes. They were designed to measure how a student is doing on a few days during the year relative to the standards that are part of that grade level.
Thank you, Lori, for your valuable insight and for dedicating your life to the education of our children. Hard to think of a more important mission. Next, we change gears and look at one of the largest economic engines on the Florida Gulf Coast. Just up the road in Palmetto, Manatee County, you will find Port Manatee, one of the largest ports in North America. It is an international destination that is booming. We recently paid them a visit.
Actually, you know, we are a creation of the Florida State Legislature. In 1967, legislation was passed that made Port Manatee a special dependent district of Manatee County. And the governance structure that we have is a 7-person board. And the Port Authority Board is composed of the 7 county commissioners. So it is the elected board, and the board elects its own chair independent of the county commission.
The Board of County Commissioners that sits on the board, what are their fiscal and operational authority here?
Well, they are primarily a policy and oversight group. The operation of the port is vested in the executive director, my boss, Carlos Bucaris.
Yes.
And I assist Carlos in that.
A question, the Panama Canal.
Yes.
Now the Panama, you've heard this question a great deal. It's recently reopened to larger tankers, which is obviously having a major impact on international trade. So tell us how this has impacted Port Manatee.
Well, I think it's an evolving thing. All new waterways go through that process of building. When they cut the ribbon, it just doesn't explode. It evolves. And our expectation for the Gulf of Mexico is somewhat different from that of the East Coast. And on the Gulf, we'll primarily benefit from transshipment. Transshipment is the process where they bring the larger ships through the canal to a transshipment facility, for example, Kingston, Jamaica, or Freeport in the Bahamas, and they offload from those larger ships into smaller ships. That's called cascading, and then those are the vessels that are most likely to come into the Gulf. It will certainly bring an increase in ship traffic to the Gulf, so I expect all Gulf ports to benefit from that. But given the depths of channels in the Gulf, it's more likely that those larger ships are going to move to the East Coast ports.
Well, what's your threshold, 40 feet depth?
We have an authorized 40-foot channel. In fact, we have a dredge working right now to help us maintain that 40 feet.
Sure. What are your 5 import-export commodities? Name
Well,
5 major.
Certainly, petroleum has been a very important growth area for us. You'll see on port today, there's a juice ship out there.
We saw that, yes.
Yeah, the Brazilian orange juice has been a tremendous business.
But you import and export juice.
We both import and export, yes. The Florida juice is exported to Europe, and the Brazilian juice is imported to the U.S. You know, we also are a major distribution facility for Fresh Del Monte, as well as our Mexican service, World Direct Shipping. That principal commodity is tropical fruit. Other couple of areas that have been tremendous growth areas for us are forest products, again primarily from South America, and also metals from South America. So those are basically the the growth commodities that we're seeing.
Explain the metals. What do you mean by?
Metals, we bring in aluminum ingots, and we also bring in steel coils, steel beams, etc.
What is the ratio between import and export?
Well, like the U.S. in general, you know, the imports dominate. And I don't have a specific ratio figure, but my guess would probably be 80-20. Export is an area that we're certainly looking to grow here at Port Manatee. We have worked particularly hard with the counties south of here. You know, we are Southwest Florida's port. To let them know that for companies that want to develop and grow in their counties and they want to be in the export business, they have an outlet here at Port Manatee for export.
How is your footprint compared with the other few major deepwater seaports so that it enables you to do more transferring? You're in a different kind of, you're not landlocked.
No, well, you know, we certainly have great growth potential here by virtue of the fact that we have such a land asset. We have 1,100 acres inside the fence,
Yes.
our footprint on the port, but we've also got 5,000 developable acres just across Route 41.
And that's privately owned, correct?
Yes, it is all privately owned, but you know, this is a situation that has 2 components. One is that we have an incentive zone that the county has established. That would provide county incentives for businesses that would develop there based on how many jobs they create, what their revenue level would be, etc. The second part of that is that we actively engage those landowners. We have met with them on several occasions.
Who are the landowners?
It's a multitude, you know, there's not a single owner, but we have encouraged them to market those properties for maritime purposes so that the port would benefit, and we think the county would benefit from that because maritime jobs tend to be higher paying than the average job in a county.
So how do you think the technology and how we're advancing technology, how are you going to utilize that here? How does Port Manatee get on the map with the latest in technology with your position here, your footprint?
Well, certainly, you know, it's like real estate, location, 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 and we probably have the best location of any port on the Gulf. You know, given the proximity to population centers and the fact that, you know, we're right at the entrance to Tampa Bay gives us a tremendous advantage. As far as technology is concerned, we primarily employ that in the security area. Security is one of the highest priorities, if not the highest priority on the port. In fact, we have roughly a third of our workforce dedicated to seaport security.
Really? A third
Yes.
of the, you average about 24,000 employees here?
Well, I'm talking about the Port Authority itself.
The authority itself?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have about 74 employees, and with roughly a third of those in the security department itself.
I guess that's the new state-of-the-art field. That's fascinating.
Well, you know, it's evolving all the time, and now we have the added component of cybersecurity to be concerned about. And we certainly pride ourselves on having one of the best, if not the best, Seaport Security Department in the country. In fact, our Director of Seaport Security trains other port security facility officers all over the country. We are the only port in the nation that's certified by the U.S. Maritime Administration for facility security officer training.
Wonderful. Back to the use of you're over 5,000 acres and privately owned. I hear there's something called Air Products.
Well, Air Products is that's just a tremendous success story.
Tell me about that.
Well, you know, Air Products has been around for a long time, and they had their facilities in eastern Pennsylvania, and they had a transport nightmare. The heat exchangers that they build are huge. And they had to be transported from their facility at Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania to the Port of Philadelphia. It cost them over $1 million a unit just to transport that unit from the factory to the port.
I see.
They looked to expand. They looked at literally every seaport in the country. And they selected Port Manatee because of that encouragement and incentive zone that we have, number one, and number two, because they were directly across the street from the dock.
Sure.
So instead of having a $1 million path to the port, they're able to do that now literally for a few $1,000s, and they've got less than a mile.
Well, you get soup to nuts. You get everybody close by.
Yes. Yeah.
To manufacture and then onto the boat.
Yeah. In fact, they have just bought an additional parcel to expand their facility.
Last question. Visitors here, this is absolutely a phenomenal place, and I look forward to touring it later on. How many visitors do you get in any given year that come here that want to find out more about what's going on here, and who are the entities that visit here?
Well, you know, up until this year, we ran a seasonal tram tour that attracted literally thousands of people every year. And unfortunately, we have grown to the point where we just can't safely accommodate the public in that mode any longer. There is so much truck traffic now on the port, it's just grown exponentially over the last couple of years. So what we've done is we've selectively made the port available to business groups and civic groups. All they have to do is contact our Senior Manager for Communications, Virginia Zimmerman, and Virginia will set them up with a tour, and we welcome that.
Who knew our area is so important to international trade, and what a critical role Port Manatee plays in our regional economy? And don't forget, you can always join the conversation online, on Facebook, at the Suzanne Atwell Show, and this program as well. All our previous shows are available on YouTube at Suzanne Atwell Show and our website, suzanneatwell.org. Well, that wraps up another show. We leave you with the sights and sounds of the Sarasota Military Academy. See you around town.